Good day, Tragic here, and welcome to part 2 of my Cultists. And this has been a very painful experience for me, and I'm very unhappy with how it's all gone. It's been difficult for me to sit down and try and fix it because I don't really think it can be fixed. But I have learnt quite a lot during this process, which is why I was doing everything on these models to begin with, to learn. So there's a lot of experimentation going on in this video, so we'll see how it all turns out in the end. First thing I did was switch to doing one model rather than doing all the models in case it all screwed up, because I didn't want to repeat the mistake on all 3 of them and then be unable to make any of them look any good at all. So the first thing I did is try to rebase the model for the cloak with a much brighter red. The idea here that I was going to base red, like base in a bright color, and work my way down into the shadows. And for this I'm using bloody red mixed with a little bit of white. In addition, while I'm doing all this stuff, I'm just continuing to add the golden yellow glazing to the yellow robes. I then mix up a batch of Games Workshop Undercoat Black along with some gory red and to make a very dark, almost like a dark black red color to do the recesses. Unfortunately, I don't thin it nearly enough and it goes on horrifically thick, probably because I use an undercoat paint for the black, but whatever, that's what happened. And it was so thick, I thought, oh, this isn't going to work. So I decided to then recoat it again, completely black, or in that black red, very deep black, and then work on highlights instead of going the other way around. Now obviously this is putting quite a lot of layers of paint on it, but because it's a robe and it's all smoothing and flowing, there's no detail really, it doesn't make a huge difference. And remember, I am experimenting and learning. So, oh well. Now I've been using like a golden yellow the whole time to sort of continually highlight the robes. So what I actually thought I'd do is I mixed a bit of golden yellow in with that gory red to make a very bright sort of orangey color. And I'm using that to do extreme highlights. And I do extreme highlights with the orange, and then I do another extreme highlight with bone white. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because I wanted to test out a concept that a friend of mine told me about, where you paint in different types of colors and then tint the colors with an ink, and the ink brings all the colors together as well as changing the bright colors into that ink shade. And it actually works extremely well, except I wasn't good enough with the layering and I had very, very harsh divisions of line between the dark and the light. This is probably the biggest lesson I've gotten from this whole experience. There's been a number of lessons, I'll talk about them at the end in detail, but basically don't let washes pool, that's huge, and thin your paints down. I mean, when you paint, you basically want to be painting with clear and just a little bit of pigment, and then you just layer and layer and layer, and slowly it all builds up. If I'd done that now, this would have looked a lot better, but because the paint was too thick, the line of the bright orange and the dark is just so strong, even after it's been retinted later on. So even though I didn't have the paints thinned enough to do proper layering, I was attempting to do that. So I did the orange, and then I did a thinner layer of just the golden yellow by itself, and then I did a really, really thin layer of that bone white, like a pencil thin line on the very edge. And now I'm applying the red game ink. Okay, so I've basically redone the cloak. Now I've got the colors on it, like it's nice and bright. It's got the dark contrast, like they were trying to tell me about on the forums, but it's got a terrible transition, like really stark. So what I've done is, off some advice, I mean, you can do this with just water, but I wanted to try it out. I bought some Winsor & Newton's acrylic medium. It's like a matte medium, and it's basically a clear acrylic paint that has no pigment. It's sort of whitish looking, but it dries clear. And you mix this with your paints, and it kind of like separates the paint out into nice glazes. This is the idea. Because it's not water, it doesn't create streaking and stuff. You get like a really smooth transition. And it works very, very well. My surprise was it's very thick. It's almost like a PVC kind of glue looking shape. So it's very, very, very thick stuff. And this is my first time using it. I didn't really realize what that meant. So it goes on quite thick, a bit streaky. And especially when I was doing the yellow robe, because when I did the yellow robes for these next two pieces, I used the medium as well. It actually went on quite thick, as in, I think it even raised, made like a little bump, Anyway, the point is it worked very, very well though. Basically, when I painted the red mixture, which was a mixture of Cowdor red base and undercoat black and the matte medium, quite a lot of matte medium to the color, it was painting on almost clear, like you literally couldn't see it. In fact, you couldn't even tell anything was happening until many layers had been put down. And I'll try and find a nice before and after image, but it really smoothed the transitions out. Now obviously it's not perfect, because for starters I'm a beginner, and also it came from such a bad starting point. But it really made me think that I think the key is actually this glazing layering kind of way of painting. very thin layers and building up color, because you can build up from dark to light or even from light to dark, and the transitions, because you're painting with clear kind of paint, the bits you paint over the more times will be brighter, so, and the rest will be clear, giving you smoother gradations. So in this case I mixed up a kind of middle paint, so it's like a very sort of medium dark red, and I painted that in the transition between the light and the deep dark red. For the second coat, I thought I would try, because remember, these are experiments and I'm learning, and I'm a very hands-on kind of learner. I prefer to just try things myself. I'm not a big tutorial kind of person. I know I've been following the asset guides, but I learn by experimenting. So what I thought I'd do this time is, instead of painting it dark and building it up, this time I'd leave it the red that's there and try and paint in the recesses. And this doesn't work out too well. I used a secret weapon wash called Heavy Body Black, and this is a very heavy color. I'm quite surprised at how strong the secret weapon pigments are, and I think you really need to water these down to use them if you want to use them as a traditional wash. They seem to be more about physically painting or using as weathering effects or something. So the black is so black, it really was quite stark. I think that this soft body black would be perfect for like outlining Space Marine armor or something. Like get a tip on the brush and just tap it into the crack and just have it fill the crack, and it's just like a point line across the crack. I think that's what it's kind of for. And some of these really high pigment secret weapon washes seem to be used like that, like physically as paints, you know, like as in liquid paints. Very weird stuff. So I then mixed in with the Heavy Body Black Just Red, another wash of theirs, and it came out a lot nicer, but the damage had kind of been done. Still, the contrast of the black to the red was still looking kind of good, so I went back to the remaining solution I had for the other coat, which was, you know, the acrylic medium and all that kind of stuff, and did the same thing, blending from the super dark black into the light. And I have to say, at this point, I'm so over these models. I've been experimenting a lot on them and they're not looking very good, and it's very hard to feel motivated to keep going. I think I really improved one of them, but so I really didn't put the same effort into the layering here, and it shows.
Now these are the two models. Remember, I'm doing 3 of these guys at once. Haven't had any of the highlighting done to their yellow robe, so I'm doing that now, except this time I'm doing it with the acrylic medium instead of water, and it's the same color, golden yellow. Now, as I said, the acrylic medium definitely needs to be thinned because it's way too thick, and it doesn't produce as good a result as just thinning it with water like I did on the first one. I am not 100% convinced that the acrylic medium is even necessary. Finally, I feel that even though the layering was a lot nicer, and I think the next time I attempt something like this, it's going to be much better because I can take all these lessons with me, it still doesn't seem cohesive. So I give it another wash of red ink, this time thinned a little with just water, and just put an ink over the whole thing again. And especially for the model that I did the hard body black on, it just sort of gave that deep pure black recess a little bit of a red tint that I think looked a lot better, and just sort of brought all the colors into one once again. And finally, as I've kind of, what's the word, fed up, I thought I'd try something really radical with the last coat. I thought, look, I'll just repaint it because I was so intrigued by how the secret weapon washes were going. I thought, what I'll do is I'll paint the whole thing in white. Just give it another coat of white. I'm using ceramic white from Games Workshop mixed with a little water, and just give it another base coat, and then I'm going to paint it in layers of different shades of secret weapon washes, and just let it roll off the edges and make the white coming through as the highlight, and then if required I can shade it with the game color just to see how that would work. Again, radical and just an idea I had on a whim, and typical of my experimentally type of way I like to do things. So we'll see how that turns out. Anyway, that's it for this one. There's going to only be one more video and I'm pretty much done. I'm just going to do some final touch-ups on the skulls and the face and the hands and stuff, and do the gold for the swords and the scepter, and it's ready to call these ones done. So I will see you guys next time.